I recently took a trip to visit a friend in a small coastal town. As you might know, I live in a big city now, and there's this entire part of the country, the southeast coast, that's completely new territory for me. I've been to some of the more famous seaside spots, the ones you hear about in movies. But there are so many other charming coastal towns worth exploring in the summer. So, I went to see my friend in this quiet town. Honestly, it might not be the most glamorous beach destination, but it was lovely to take a walk along the shore. My friend uses a wheelchair, so it wasn't the kind of visit where we spent hours on the sand or I went for a swim, but we did have a nice time shopping. I found some fantastic shirts in a store called Outdoor Provisions. As the name suggests, it's a shop for hiking gear, camping equipment, and all things practical for the wilderness. But they surprisingly had some really stylish, non-outdoorsy clothes, and the best part was that this particular store was having a closing down sale. I managed to get some great shirts for a really good price. By the way, before I get too far into my stories, I should probably give you an audio description of my outfit. Some of you are watching this, but many are just listening, and I wouldn't want to deny you the splendor of what I'm wearing today. An audio description is what they provide for visually impaired people at the movies, a voice that narrates all the on-screen action. So here is a brief audio description of me. Before you is a very handsome non-binary person in their early 30s, though it's hard to believe they're so young. Their thick, luscious brown hair is styled upwards because they took the time to blow-dry it today. They are wearing a pair of elegant glasses and have a wonderfully thick, bushy mustache. They have two large, squiggle-shaped earrings. A squiggle is a shape that's nearly impossible to describe with words alone, so if you're curious, you might want to check out the video version. They are also wearing a stunning, colorful shirt with a green stripe down the center, a pink pocket, a lovely mustard yellow on one side, and a kind of psychedelic plaid pattern on the other. Plaid is that classic pattern you see on Scottish kilts, and I'd call this a psychedelic plaid. So that's my look for today. You don't need to see me to know I am absolutely buzzing with energy. I swear, I've only had one coffee and 0 illicit substances. Sometimes, life itself is the ultimate stimulant, or maybe I am. Another exciting piece of news is a bit of a story. Near my apartment, there's a neighborhood grocery store. It's one of those big chain supermarkets, but this one is part of a cooperative, which means the employees are also members and theoretically have a say in how the business is run. It's a great concept, though I find their prices a bit high for the quality you get. But since I'm not a member, my opinion doesn't really matter. What does matter, though, is something interesting that happened there. Ever since I moved into my place, I noticed one of the employees at this market was always especially friendly with me. At first, he just complimented my hair, saying, "Hey, I like your hair," and I'd say thank you. Every time I went in, we'd chat for a minute, getting to know each other a little. I started to pick up on some flirtatious vibes, a feeling that he might be interested in me. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Sometimes people are just being nice as part of their job, and you don't want to be that creepy person who misinterprets kindness for romantic interest. But in this instance, my intuition was right. One day, I walked into the store, and a coworker of this lovely man approached me. She said, "You're Alex, right?" My coworker, "Well, he really likes you. He has a bit of a crush on you and wanted to ask you out, but he's incredibly shy. He asked me if I could ask you for him." It was so sweet. I gave her my phone number. She passed it along to her colleague, and we ended up going on a date. We went out for drinks, and the whole situation felt like something straight out of a romantic comedy, not real life. Unfortunately, it turned out that we weren't the most compatible people. We were just not a great match, and we only went on that one date. But the experience itself was fun and memorable. I'm keeping his name private because I wouldn't want him to stumble upon this and feel embarrassed. In other news, I tried stand-up comedy for the first time. Stand-up is a term that's pretty universal now, but if you don't know, it's a form of comedy where a performer stands on stage with a microphone and tells jokes directly to the audience. It's the rawest, most direct form of comedy there is. It's huge in America, where I think it originated, but it's also incredibly popular here in the UK and in many other countries now. As much as it's the rawest form of comedy, it's also one of the most terrifying types of performance you can do. With stand up, if you do poorly, if you bomb, you could be facing a few minutes of incredibly awkward, uncomfortable silence. Laughter is a fundamental form of social approval, so getting on stage and having no one laugh is like the social equivalent of being repeatedly punched in the face. Fortunately, I didn't bomb. My first set actually went really well. I'm not going to give you all the details because I've already shared the full story elsewhere, so I won't spoil it. But you can look forward to hearing about it in the future. As of recording this, I've done 3 short 5-minute sets, so nothing too intense, and I have more booked in the coming weeks because I absolutely love it. I have to admit, I don't usually get stage fright. I might get a little nervous for a minute or two before performing, but with stand-up, I get so nervous. My stomach churns, and I get shaky. But let me tell you, nothing compares to the validation you feel when you get those laughs. When I'm up there telling jokes and people laugh, it feels like a drug going straight into my veins. I've never actually done that, so I can only imagine, but I assume it's a similar feeling. Another thing that happened recently, which you might already know about, is that I got a horrible stomach bug. That was the reason I had to miss an episode last month. I was really sick. It was a terrible combination of a stomach bug and constipation. A stomach bug is when your body wants everything to come out, and constipation is when it wants everything to stay in. As you can imagine, that combination is extremely uncomfortable. I was in a lot of pain, I couldn't sleep, and I even had to go to the hospital to get some medicine. Thankfully, I recovered, and as you can probably tell, I'm feeling much better now. I'm back to living my life, full of energy, and taking risks, like almost poking my eye out with my earring just now. I also went with my mother to see the National Art Institute's summer exhibition. I love spending time with my mom. I've officially reached the age where she has become one of my best friends. I know that's not everyone's experience, but I adore my mom. The National Art Institute is basically the most prestigious arts institution in the country. They host exhibitions for painting, sculpture, and all kinds of visual art. Every year, they hold a summer exhibition where any member of the public can submit a piece of art. They then curate a massive collection of the best submissions for everyone to view and even purchase. It's a fascinating concept. There were about 1,700 pieces on display, so it was quite overwhelming. By the end, you feel completely exhausted. The exhibition features every imaginable type of visual art: paintings, drawings, photography, video installations, and sculptures. I have to say, it wasn't quite as amazing as I had expected. My mom had hyped it up a lot, but because anyone can submit artwork and because visual art is so subjective, it was a very mixed bag. I felt they put a lot of the safe, more boring artwork at the beginning and saved the really interesting stuff for the end. By the time you get there, you're too tired to fully appreciate it. However, one thing that made it different from other art shows was the price list. I'm holding up a small book which lists all the artworks with their titles and prices. As I mentioned, you can buy any of the original pieces or a print of it. As you walk around, you can see which artworks have been purchased because they have little red stickers next to them. This makes it easy to see which pieces are the most popular. And surprisingly, the ones that sell the most are usually the cheaper ones. But believe me, there were some incredibly expensive pieces there. I saw one for £15,000, another for £4,800, and so on. The ones that sold the most were typically in the £20 to £100 range. This was fascinating to me because the art world usually tries to hide the financial side of things. But this exhibition put the money aspect front and center for everyone to see. I appreciated that change of pace. Looking at some of the pieces, I definitely had the thought, I could do that. So, who knows, maybe next year I'll submit something to the summer exhibition. Another rather unique experience I had was going to a restaurant with my brother called Dine in the Dark. As the name implies, it's a restaurant where you eat your entire meal in complete darkness. When you arrive, you're introduced to your guide and waiter, who is a blind person. You place your hand on their shoulder, and they lead you into a pitch-black room. You sit down with a menu, but you have no idea what you're eating until it arrives. Of course, you eat it without being able to see it, and only afterward do they show you pictures of the food you ate. We had a 5-course tasting menu, and it was very interesting. The food was good. Honestly, I expected the experience to be quite overwhelming, but it was the opposite. It was very relaxing. By the end, I felt like I could fall asleep. I also thought that some of the food would be hard to identify by taste alone, as our sense of sight heavily influences our perception of flavor. I've played a game before where you blindfold someone and feed them different foods to see if they can guess what they are, and people almost never guess tomatoes correctly. In this case, there was only one food item I really struggled with, and that was the apricot in our dessert. We had these lovely baked apricots, but they didn't taste like apricot at all. I thought it was passion fruit or dragon fruit. It turned out they had cooked the apricot with rosemary, a herb that completely changed its flavor profile and made it almost unrecognizable. A funny side effect was that you're seated very close to other tables, and you naturally end up talking to your neighbors. I guess normally, if you could see them, you might not start a conversation without making eye contact first, but in the dark, you just talk to the people you can hear. It's also quite challenging to eat. You end up leaning over your plate or just using your hands. Pouring water is a risky maneuver, but it was a really fun experience, and if you ever get the chance to try something similar, I highly recommend it. I know there's something called dark therapy, which is more intense, where you stay in a completely dark hotel for several days. I would love to try that, but as a small taste of that experience, this was wonderful. I also saw a film called Orlando, My Political Biography, a French film by the director Paul B. Preciado. I was really excited about this because the director wrote a very strange book of queer theory in the 80s called Countersexual Manifesto, which is bizarre but full of interesting ideas that are still relevant today. So, I was expecting something very experimental and weird. The film is based on Virginia Woolf's novel Orlando, which is about a nobleman who, halfway through the book, wakes up transformed into a woman. It's considered one of the earliest transgender novels. I love Virginia Woolf. Her writing style is a huge inspiration for me, and Orlando is an amazing book. So, I had high hopes for this film, which is a loose adaptation using trans and non-binary actors. But I have to say, it was a bit of a disappointment. It wasn't as radical as I expected, especially compared to the director's other work. It felt repetitive and had a very loose structure that made it boring in parts. It was okay, but my expectations were much higher. However, it is an interesting film, and if you don't know much about the novel Orlando or about transgender politics and experiences, you would probably enjoy it a lot more than I did. Recently, there was also the big Pride Parade in the city. You've probably heard of Pride. I'd be surprised if you hadn't. The one in my city is one of the biggest Pride events in the world. I was planning to march with people from queer-friendly churches, including many from my own. I got there, we were getting ready to march, and I was just completely overwhelmed. It was so loud, there were so many people, it was sunny and hot, and my least favorite thing was happening: overlapping music. You know, when one person has a speaker playing one song and another song is blasting from somewhere else, and the two just clash horribly. I was just too overwhelmed, so I decided to go home, but I made the mistake of walking through the city's gay district on my way back, and it was unbelievably busy. I have never seen so many people out in the city before. At one point, I went into a grocery store to get some food, yes, that same grocery store chain, and they had a DJ inside. A DJ in a supermarket, that's how wild it was. Then I went to a bubble tea shop, got my drink, and almost had a panic attack. So, my Pride experience was not so fun this year, but at least now I know what to expect for next time. I think next year I'll do something calmer, like go to a picnic where I don't have to be around so many people. And finally, today that's right. The chain of past events is over. We're in the present. I'm going to see an Italian film called La Chimera. I read a brief description, and it sounded very interesting, but I can't really remember what it's about now. When I go to see a film, I actually prefer to go in blind, not knowing too much about it. That way, I don't have any preconceived expectations or prejudices, and I find I enjoy films much more. In the past, I used to look up reviews before watching anything, and I think that killed some of the enjoyment for me. So, I'm going to see La Chimera with a friend, and I'm sure it will be lovely. I know I have quite a few Italian listeners, so if you've seen this film, please let me know what you thought of it. So, as my mother likes to say, it's all go. Lots of things happening at the moment, lots going on in my life. It's so rare that I have this much energy, so I'm really glad it happened on a day I was recording. I get to share all my manic energy with you, although I fear I might have been a bit much today, and you're all going to listen to this and think, Alex, what is wrong with you? What have you been taking? And I just want to clarify that the only thing I'm high on is life.